Looks like we have a good group here today, so we'll just get started with a quick welcome and overview and then move on to the presentation. So hello, thank you for being here. My name is Julie Miller. I'm with the Haverford College Center for Peace and Global Citizenship. Today's webinar is called Navigating Pennsylvania K-12 Resources and Materials for Global Competence with Deanna Baird and Marcia Thomas. So just as a quick tech overview, if you experience any technical issues while you're in this webinar, please feel free to message me directly in the chat. You've probably done this a few times by now, but just in case, the chat button is at the bottom of your screen, and then you'll be able to either message the whole group or you can choose individual people. So my name, Julie Miller, will be listed there. If you get dropped out of the webinar for some reason and can't get back in, feel free to email me. And I'll troubleshoot with you. You can just respond to the email I sent yesterday that had this meeting link in it. Let's see, so you're muted by default here just for the presentation part. There will be at least 2 moments of discussion and small group work, at which point you can totally feel free to unmute yourselves. But in the meantime, feel free to drop in any questions or comments to the chat as the presentation goes along, just to record any of your thoughts along the way. And the presenters will be able to respond to them either during the presentation or at the end. So of course, our aim with this webinar is to foster inclusive dialogue and sharing. If there are any racist or discriminatory messages during the dialogue, we do retain the right to remove participants if necessary. We encourage questions and conversation in the spirit of advancing shared understanding. And this webinar is being recorded. You did consent to that when you joined, but just want to make sure that you're 100% aware. So feel free to turn your cameras on, or if you're more comfortable during the presentation having your camera off, that's also fine. So yes, feel free to message me if you have any issues. And right now I'm going to pass the mic over to Hillary Kane, who is the director of the Philadelphia Higher Education Network for Neighborhood Development. Hillary?
Thank you so much, Julie. So welcome everyone. Today's webinar is sponsored by 3 different membership networks. I'm representing FEND, the Philadelphia Higher Education Network for Neighborhood Development, also known as FEND. We also have co-sponsoring with us today the Pennsylvania Council for International Education, known as PATTAN, and the Community-Based Global Learning Collaborative, also known as the Collaborative for short, which is hosted by the Center for Peace and Global Citizenship at Haverford College. While these 3 networks have different missions, we do share the overlapping mission of the intersection of supporting diverse people working together on campuses and in communities to create more welcoming, just, inclusive, and sustainable communities. And it's our pleasure to help co-sponsor this event. So I will turn it back over to Julie, who will take it away.
Great, thank you, Hillary. So Nicole Sprague, who is also here today from CIEE, will help us introduce ourselves and then move on to the presentation.
Thanks, Julie. As Julie mentioned, my name is Nicole Sprague, and I am based in Media, Pennsylvania. And along with Deanna and Marcia, I serve on the board of the Pennsylvania Council for International Education. PACE works to make sure global education is accessible for all PA students. I'm very excited for this webinar with Deanna and Marcia on resources for global education and tying them to state standards. We have educators in the Zoom call. I know we've got a few from across the state. So we get comfortable using the chat. I'd like to see if everybody wouldn't mind just dropping your name into the chat box and take 1 minute to kind of jot down where you work, your location, and perhaps a brief mention of why you joined the webinar today. We can do this really quickly, and then I will just call on your name and you can share those details. I'll give everybody a minute. Great. While everybody continues to add, I'm going to call on a couple of you so you can introduce yourself. Kimberly, Rochelle, would you like to go?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kim Seiko. I work at the Temple University, and actually, the reason why I joined this session is because actually I studied in Seville, Spain when I was an undergrad. So hopefully to use my skills and experiences to kind of work with, hopefully on an engagement perspective on accessing students of color or urban students about the importance of study abroad and just learn, and hopefully partner with K-12 educators to help with that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Welcome today. Christian?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christian Wobel. I work at Providence College up in Rhode Island, where I'm the Dean of Global Education. I've joined similar webinars sponsored by this group over the past few months, and I have a research interest in the internationalization of teacher education. So I'm, definitely interested in what's going on in K-12 and, the relationships and, global education between the two.
Great. Thank you so much. We have a Kristen.
Hi, I'm Kristen Clardy with Novus Project. I have a small person with me after school hours. We're an educational nonprofit. We support educators all over the country in global citizenship education, that intersection of where diversity, equity, inclusion work meets service learning, specifically focusing on global engagement projects. So we take school groups and teachers on global initiatives. And have been very involved with the community-based global learning collaborative for many years. So excited to see this, the work that has manifested here.
Thank you very much. Welcome. And please excuse me if I pronounce this wrong, but Canny?
Myself here. Yes, it's Canny.
Okay, great.
Canny Schaefer. Yes, and as you can see from what I wrote, I'm at Girard College. And everyone always thinks that it should be a college, but our founder, founded the school here in Philadelphia for orphaned children originally. We are in the middle of a self-study for accreditation. Any of you who have done that will smile, for Middle States. We have agreed to bring together a lot of projects that we have been probably not executing very well. It's very much a part of our mission to do social impact. Mr. Girard wanted our students to be fit citizens. That was his quote. And we're working on that. So I thought this webinar might help me be able to, in turn, work and direct our committee a little bit forward. Thank you.
And it looks like we just had another participant join. Lorraine? If you just joined, we're just asking that everybody introduce themselves, say where you're from, and also maybe why and what you're hoping to get out of the webinar today. You just have to unmute yourself. Well, if anybody from our board wants to introduce themselves, I know Julie, you introduced yourself, and Hillary, if you'd like to, as well as Marcia and Deanna.
Marcia's going to introduce us in a minute.
Yeah. Okay.
I guess I'll just say that I'm excited to be here and always wanting to support K-12 programming, particularly through a university partnership lens, and just wanting to always find new ways to do that. So this is perhaps one great avenue.
Great, thank you. So now I will turn it over to Deanna and Marcia. Please, as a reminder, we're here. I know we've got a lot going on, but to keep the energy going, make sure that everybody's participating. If you have any questions, hold them till later. Or if you have any additional ideas, just put them in the chat and we'll enjoy the session.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm Marcia Thomas, and welcome to our webinar series. PaTTAN is very happy to be partnering with the Community-Based Global Learning Collaborative and the Philadelphia Higher Education Network for Neighborhood Development. Those are a lot of words, but they're cool organizations, to host a series of webinars supporting global education. We really thank you for joining us today. We're hoping to review some new and updated materials and resources that are available in Pennsylvania and anywhere else that wants to access them to support instruction for global competence. We believe these resources may be particularly helpful to teachers planning instruction in a COVID-19 environment. You may be wondering, how do I bring the world to my students when they may not be able to go out into the world? So specifically, we're going to take a look at the framework for global competence that's available on Pennsylvania's Standards Line System, or SAS, website. Those of you who are teachers are probably familiar with SAS. There are materials and resources for global competence also on SAS. There's a PaTTAN Global Educator Toolkit that's new, PaTTAN mini grant opportunities, and PaTTAN webinars, teacher talks, and teacher tips. We've been doing a lot of work to bring resources available to K-12 teachers and higher ed too. Our goal today is to provide a brief overview of these resources and an explanation of how to access these and use them in your construction. Please note that the resources are not just for classes specifically identified as international studies or global education. They can be used to support any teacher or team that's seeking to build global competence in any curriculum content area with any student. Today's webinar has a special focus on K-12, but we believe the resources are also appropriate for use in higher education settings. Let me see if I can. Why won't it change my slide there? All right, so who we are. Deanna Baird is a retired language and international studies teacher of 43 years. Deanna was department chair and coordinator of a German exchange program in Upper St. Clair School District, which is near Pittsburgh. Marcia Thomas, that's me, is a retired special education consultant and teacher educator who taught K-12 and university level in multiple countries. Both of us are on the board of directors for PaTTAN and are committed to supporting the education of students ready to be competent global citizens. It's always easy to say, let's globalize, but hard to get concrete about it and actually do it. Today, we're going to give you some tools for that. Deanna, over to you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. As said, we both are excited that we have some things here for K-12. And I'm excited to know that so many of you in the university community want to connect with K-12. One of the big things with K-12 that I always found, if I said to people, oh, let's do some global competence, they would always groan because they were afraid they would have to change their whole curriculum around. So one of my goals has always been to say, come up with one or two things. And if you can do those one or two things consistently, you will make great inroads into developing a global mindset in kids. As you know, you can use the chat space on the side if you have anything. And as you know, we have a lot of resources we're going to share today. But another component that we're going to do really is try to be very concrete about how to adapt lessons the teachers already have without rewriting everything, just using one or two tools. So the first thing that you often ask whenever you try to do this kind of thing is, what is global competence? PaTTAN's goal is to make globally competent grads, global ready grads. So what is it that we're trying to make in these kids? The next slide has a nice little definition. We don't want to debate this, you know, we want to move on. But the nice little definition from the Asia Society, whom I'm sure we all trust, is that global competence is the capacity and disposition to understand and act on issues of global significance. So the question then becomes, what's that actually mean? If you look at it, the goal right now would be to pull out four main ideas. So as you glance at that, if you could look at what you think four main things are that you need. Well, the first obvious one is capacity. Our kids and our teachers have to have the ability, the capacity to understand issues. That's doable. Disposition, that's a little harder. The disposition to understand and act on issues of global significance, they have to want to do it. And that's a big one. And then after they want to do it, they have to remember to do it. So one of the things that I have always said is you have to act with intent. So if you can have those 1 or 2 tools that you consistently use over the course of, let's say, this next year, and if you can use that with intent, then your disposition is there, but you just need to remember to actually do it. Third word out of the 4 would be to understand issues, and I think we train our students and our teachers on that all the time. The 4th component is to act on issues. That's really exciting because in the past, when I was younger and when I was middle-aged, we used to learn about, understand issues, and oh, wasn't that fun? We talked about them and had a great time. But to actually act on them, that's a newer thing. And today's high school students and our college students, if there's one thing many of them want to do, it's be some sort of an activist, or they want to be able to act on things and maybe change the issue that is of global significance. So we're very excited about that. And when we start to talk about global competence and look at the framework that PaTTAN's built, you will see there is a whole component on action. On our next slide, we can see a few more ideas that relate to global competence. And obviously the slide is big enough that you can read a webinar as opposed to in an audience somewhere. There may be some words here that you really like. And if there are some components that you see there that you really like, you might want to jot them down, because whenever we get to the point of trying to adapt some lessons, you might want to think back on attentiveness to diversity, like I want to incorporate more diversity in my unit. Or you might think back to risk taking. I have to encourage kids to take risks. That's a hard one sometimes. So those are some ideas that you might want to jot down. These are all part of global competence. We'll move on to our main targets, which you've had an overview already. The global competence. We will locate that SAS framework with Marcia, and hopefully once you get into that, you may be looking it up in the future, for example, that can be used to inspire you to do some of the global work with your students. And if you're training teachers, which it sounds like some of you would be, that you can use to train your teachers with. We're going to focus on 4 main components because I said most teachers, if they can focus on 1 or 2 things and apply them throughout the course of the year, as opposed to upsetting the whole apple cart, they're a lot happier. So we're going to focus on the 4 main components and see how we can use them. We'll use them with some typical units across different disciplines. And then Marcia will locate and show you where you can find the resources that PaTTAN has come up with, because as she said, we have so added to our resources because we sort of felt that Pennsylvania was a little behind the curve on this. So now there's a lot more that you can find on the PaTTAN site and on the SAS site. So moving on to the 4 components before Marcia starts with the framework. Some of you may have seen these already. I don't know. I sort of hope so. The 4 main components that you will find in that SAS document, which encompasses all the competencies we love our students to know. The 4 main components are in the middle. They are investigate the world, which is sort of like do research. Recognize perspectives. I always see that as a really fun part, to get other people's perspective, and students like that too. Communicate ideas, and with this communicating, that refers both to world language, and it also refers to communicating with different audiences. Kids have to know how to talk to audiences that aren't just white middle-class kids, for example. And then take action, which I talked about on that previous slide. So Marcia is going to show you how this is put into the framework that you can use as a resource.
All right, so for the past several years, PACE has worked with teachers, administrators, leaders in the field of global education, as well as the Pennsylvania Department of Education, to develop a framework for global competence. The framework is now available on the PA SAS website. The framework's designed to support teachers in developing goals, curriculum, and educational experiences to help students develop the skills they need to be more competent global citizens. The competencies are aligned to Pennsylvania's academic standards and can be infused into any content area. So let's take a closer look at the framework. You start by going to the pdesas.org website. If you haven't been there before, that's where it starts. And then you click on curriculum frameworks. You may encounter a couple of different views, so you may find it on the top banner, or you may find it as an icon. Either one will take you to the right place. Once you're in curriculum frameworks, you click on Global Competence, and that will take you to two different documents are available. One is long-term transfer goals, one is the curriculum framework itself. If you click on the links here, the documents will download onto your computer in a PDF format. We're going to start by reviewing the 4 components of the framework, because this is important. The framework is organized into 4 areas. They are investigating our world, recognizing perspectives, communicating ideas, and taking action. And there are big ideas, concepts, and competencies across the grade bands for each component. Please think for a moment and reflect. Is there one of these components that you think is the most important for you and your students? Or maybe more than one. Let's take a look at the documents. The first one is the long-term transfer goals. And these describe the understanding, knowledge, and skills that we want students to be able to access and use in their lives as competent global citizens. This is the first page of that document. As you can see, there are big ideas and essential questions for each of the 4 components. This is a page of the framework document itself. The framework includes a lot of information for each of the 4 components. This one is about investigating our world. Over here we have the big idea, the essential questions, and down here we have concepts, grade level, competencies. For each competency, we also have an I can statement that helps to clarify the competency and helps teachers to operationalize it for instruction. Each one of these competencies is linked to PA academic standards in multiple areas. If you haven't already done so, we recommend that you download this for easy reference. Let me give you an example. So this is investigating our world, and the concept is recognizing the global impact of one's actions. Grade band 9 to 12. The competency is explore and apply an identified solution to a personal choice that has global consequences. The I can statement is I can realize global consequences of my action. I can research problems for possible solutions. Here are a bunch of standards that it's linked to. Deanna is going to guide you into a deeper dive into the framework, but first you will need this. This is a handout that was sent to you, I think, with your registration materials. If you don't have it, type in the chat box and we'll make sure you get it. But it includes some of the competencies for each component across grade bands. When you're thinking about and reflecting on the activities that Deanna is going to guide you through, choose the components and competencies you think are the most relevant for you and your students. We hope you have this available for easy reference. Deanna, over to you.
So again, you're going to hear the 4 main components, which may sound a little boring, but I really want to make sure you get the 4 main components down. It is doable to learn these 4 components. As you can already tell from the handout that you got and from the framework that she showed you, it's not so doable to memorize all the different competencies that you could use. That's really something you have to look up. But if you can memorize these 4 main components, that's doable. You can use it all year long. So again, if there are any of these that are particularly intriguing to you, jot it down. But we're going to practice this in the hopes that we can get them in our mind. So on the next slide, you're going to see some competencies. Each one relates to a component. So for example, 6 through 8, grades 6 through 8, the competency is to locate and read text from multiple global resource sources. Question for you, which component would that be? Hopefully, you said investigating the world. And I want you to think about the power of that competency. If kids in history, in science, in art, if they had to locate global resources for whatever paper they're writing, whatever project they're doing, and if they had to do that all year long, that would be powerful. And I know my students loved it because they'd never done it before. And I learned from it because I certainly didn't know everything they were finding out. And it was exciting to me as a teacher. So first one, investigating the world. Second one, also for level 6 through 8, evaluate how my cultural perspective influences my opinion of global issues. Sometimes we wish adults would do that. This is already at level 6 through 8 because we have to start young with this. You're probably going to say that that's cultural perspective, but according to the document, that's wrong. It's investigate, because basically you're doing research that allows you to evaluate. 3 through 5, describe all alternate strategies you might use when planned actions are unsuccessful. That's sort of like coming up with plan A, plan B, plan A, plan B. Hopefully you said that is taking action. Also a very valuable thing for kids because every plan they come up with does not always work, you know, and they need to be prepared for that. So we start that in grades 3 through 5 already. 6 through 8, recognize various communication styles and preferences and match your purpose for communicating to a specific audience and medium. You guessed it, that's communicating. So those have each shown a different component. On the next one, I'm going to ask you to do it. Your turn. Jot down, I'm not going to give you the answers yet. Jot down which component you think is to define your cultural lens, analyze its influence on my thinking and behavior. 6 through 8, which component do you think it is? Is it investigating the world? Is it recognizing cultural perspectives? Is it communicating? Is it taking action? Evaluate how historical events and people connect across countries and affect global perspectives. Which one do you think that would be? 6 through 8, determine your language growth and use this data to set personal language acquisition goals. Wow, a lot of kids muddle through a world language and they just keep going, but they don't give themselves more goals. So that's a really great competency. 9 through 12, analyze project sustainability from the multiple perspectives of the stakeholders and then determine the next steps. And pre-K 2, generate questions about a given topic. So answers are, on the very first one, I want to make sure I got this right. On the very first one, it is to do B, recognize perspectives. Boy, what a powerful one that is, to define your cultural lens. That doesn't just happen. That takes a while to develop before you get to 9-12. Second one, historical events. That is investigating because you're evaluating the events. 6 through 8 is communicating. 9 through 12 is taking action. And pre-K 2 is generating questions about a given topic, which sounds so simple, which is why it's pre-K 2. But if we trained our kids to always ask questions to figure out the answers, anytime there's a problem, you need to be able to generate questions. You know, you don't come up with inventions, you don't come up with a cure for the coronavirus unless you know how to ask the right questions. So starting with that early on and dealing with issues of global importance, that's why that's there. Now, if you look back at the very first one, 9 through 12, I said, as you remember, that that's sort of hard to do, to define your cultural lens. So another component of this framework that's in there is that there is a strand that goes across the grade level. For example, in that next slide, you could pick a component to use all year, you could pick a competency to use all year, or you could pick a competency thread to use all year. So for example, if you wanted to work with stereotypes, if you thought your students had stereotypes and you taught 10th grade, so their goal for the year would be to critique their stereotypes about other cultures in order to develop a more accurate understanding, and then also consider how other cultures may view us and our worldviews. Wow, that would be big in election year. You don't just jump in and do that. You might have to start at the bottom of the screen here with pre-K2 and just make kids realize that we do categorize people, especially in the middle school, especially in high school. Oh my God. 3 through 5, define what a stereotype is. Then the next one, analyze bias and see how that affects you and realize that you have biases. And then eventually you get to that 9-12 thing. So you potentially could do the pre-K2 for 1 unit, throw in the 3 through 5 for a unit, throw in the 6 through 8 for a unit, etc. So the concept again being to take one component, one competency, or a thread and put it into a unit that you already do. Don't upset too many apple carts. And we're going to try that now. We'll do it together once, and then we're going to break out into groups. So typical lesson plan. Gee, I'll bet every school does the American Revolution somewhere. Causes, events, results. Which component, which competency could you use, though, to maybe give that a global focus? Not for the whole unit, just maybe at the end or somewhere in that unit. Well, one possibility, for example, would be to look at it from a different cultural perspective. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up and I learned about the American Revolution, I thought all revolutions were successful. You know, the American Revolution, we rebelled, and everything turned out just great. And 200 years later, you know, we still have a country. But in fact, if you investigate it a little bit, you might find out that not all revolutions turned out perfect or turned out well. You might also investigate different perspectives on our revolution. There are probably countries who view our revolution now and then in different ways than we did, but I don't know that people talk about that. World language, everybody shops. So if you wanted to investigate shopping in Morocco or another French-speaking country in Africa, there are other ways of shopping than just in France. That would be a thing kids could investigate. Another thing you could do for action, I know when I did shopping, we always had a market in class and we sold stuff so that we could use our dialogue and use our procedures. But you could actually sell things for real. We had fake money. You could actually sell things for real and earn money and then use that money for the action of it's an organization called Free Rice. And when you send them money, they're able to give rice to kids who need more food. In our Global Educator toolkit, that is described. So that would be an example of action. In the Global Educator toolkit that Marcia's going to describe, there's an action component. So that's where you could find that. Finally, art. Everybody does drawing at some point in art. They draw their portrait, and that's great. That's great. But let's throw a different component into that art on the back slide still, Marcia.
Well, sorry.
That's all right.
I'm having issues.
On that art, you could investigate portraits that have been drawn in other countries. You could look at different cultural perspectives in those portraits. You could look at Mexican pictures. You could look at Asian ones, and you might find that everyone is not smiling. You might find that there are cultural artifacts in the background of the painting. So after kids have learned how to draw themselves, maybe it would be fun for them to draw themselves again, but do it as if they were in Mexico, or do it from an African mindset. So simple enough. You take a component that you like, you take a competency that you like, and you try to put it in. So now we're going to let you do that. And to help you, remember, you've got your 4 components, and on the handout, you have several competencies. We didn't think you'd want to look at the hundreds of them that there are, but you have several here that could give you an idea of what to do. In the breakout rooms that Julie and Nicole are going to put us into, what we'd like you to do is, as a group, come up with a competency or a perspective or a component that you could use to give a global focus to a unit on elections. Well, hi guys, at least I see a few smiles on your faces. The breakout room I went to went, oh my God, she wants us to do something now? So that's sort of shocking, I guess. But I thought we would share out, perhaps my group could start, which is, you know who you are, Kimberly and Kristen, I guess, Schaefer.
Tanny, yeah.
Yeah, okay. If you'd like to just share out anything that you thought about elections or world language history or science, how could you put a global spin on it? Which component would you use for competency?
All right, Kimberly, I'll go first. You have to do the next one. We started so simple, but we just said
that's the idea. That's good.
Fascinating that we don't do more research, just simple research in how other countries, peoples practice the act of voting. We're so used to the American system. So maybe very simply, all age groups, K-12, could just do basic research on how other countries give their citizens the right to vote.
Kimberly, you doing the next one? History?
Okay. Yes, so we thought about, again, not going back. It was kind of hard because we couldn't remember what were the topics, but we kind of went along with investigating again. I think it's for world language. Mm-hmm. And then as far as the water, again, I guess understanding perspective with the water, because Ms. Schaefer had talked about her roommate with, running the water from where she come from. I guess she's the use of water, how other people view water, the use of it, how they get water. So right. You thought about understanding perspective. She didn't like when running water I would think that would be a waste. So that's being a different perspective on how other people think about water. That's all I can think of. Sorry.
Absolutely. I know I had my students analyze how much water they use every day, dishwasher, toilet, the whole bit. Yeah. They came up with hundreds of gallons of water. Yeah. And then we talked about people in Africa going to get their water at the well or the watering hole or whatever, and how much they can carry home. And it was like, oh my God, I am so wasteful. So that's a great example of a quick global spin. How about our other room? Do we have any share outs that we can do? Oh, you're done. Other room?
I think we're the last room then. Is there just
Go
three?
For it.
We talked abstractly about, not specific examples, but I thought that with history, I could give you an example. So my organization focuses on that call to action component that you have embedded in your framework, essentially, and we do it with our Savannah program on race, power, and the preservation of African American and Gullah Geechee history. And so we're able to kind of bring to life the African diaspora of elements of culture that are then embedded into Black and Southern culture, and therefore American culture too. But the one thing that we did talk about in our group was the importance of starting with self first, so that there's a grounding before you start to otherize communities and cultures that are different.
Very important. Okay, I will share out with you what I had, just because I had more time to think about it than you did. What I came up with on the elections was to let the kids hear what other countries were saying about our election, that they could be doing some research about what people are writing in their newspapers about our elections. With the history, I taught German, and I tried to do the action component, where the kids learned in my German class about World War II, because everybody covers that, right? World War II and what it was like to be German during World War II, and what their attitude and perspective was on World War II. And then to take that to a social studies class, and communicate, not act. Go to a social studies class and explain in English what the German perspective was about World War II that they were learning in their US history class about World War II. So I tried to combine actually action, a different a thing to do, and then communicating with an audience that was different. And then in the very final one with science, we tried to investigate wells, because if you're going to be an engineer, a lot of kids want to be an engineer, investigate wells and how you dig for water and all that kind of thing. But then also maybe take action and think about what you would do if you were trying to help somebody who wanted to build wells in Africa. They're not actually going to do the action, but they can plot it out, which is pretty nice, actually. So the idea, again, being 4 components: investigating, research, recognizing perspectives, which is that fun one, communicating, and taking action. Those are the 4 things. Marcia, do we have time to take a unit on our next slide? I'm going to have to let you say that. You're muted, Marcia.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Do you want us to move on to resources, or do you want us to do?
No, Globalize, but just do it quickly.
Okay, here we go. Next slide, which Marcia will put up here, is going to ask you to think of a unit you do. So we're going to take the same two groups. So since we already know each other, so to speak, same 2 groups. Think of a unit that you do. Or if none of you are teaching right now, think of a unit you had as a kid, Think of a unit you did, what you could do to globalize it, either through investigating, recognizing perspectives, communicating with a different audience, taking an action project. Think of a unit you do. Forward, it looks like we're all back.
Okay.
Could we briefly say what one of our units is and how we gave it a global shift?
I will.
Hey, go girl, go Kimberly.
I'm
Okay.
not a teacher. I thought back one of my favorite subjects is music. I used to play the flute. So
Yes.
I was thinking about how other people from different countries perceive music, how they view music, and the importance of, the influence of music and instruments, I guess, on our lives. So I guess understanding perspective it could be, or investigating it could be.
Sure. We have a person who has applied for one of our mini grants, who's a music teacher, and what she's doing is similar to what you said, but what she's concretely going to do is have kids investigate instruments in other countries, beyond the violin and the oboe, and make them, and then see how they're being used in those countries, so what you're saying is very good. It's not all about Bach and Beethoven anymore. Does somebody else have an idea that they could share from the other group? Christian, unmute yourself.
Sure. This wasn't necessarily discussed in the other group, but it came to me just now. I had a colleague at my previous institution who was teaching math education, and something that she did to sort of globalize. I mean, I'm talking about higher ed here, but still this could trickle down to K-12.
But everybody in math says they can't do this, so go for it.
She was doing a class on like grids. I mean, I'm not a math person, so it's hard for me to, describe it. But she used, what she did was she somehow then took that and introduced subway maps from around the world and how they were sort of presented in certain ways and comparing them. So that was a way in which she sort of brought, global content into a math education course. So I thought that was pretty cool. Something we discussed in this other breakout room is I have a sister who teaches kindergarten, and she does a rainforest unit, which already kind of gets the global in there already. So I guess she's already doing some of this stuff. Maybe she doesn't need, a session like this to tell her to do global competence work in her classroom. But that's something that she does, and I thought it was pretty cool when she described it to me, because it's like, wow, you're globalizing your kindergarten class.
Those are great ideas, and I would just say again before Marcia starts, when you're working with K-12 people, don't ask them to upset the whole apple cart and globalize everything. They cannot do it. But if you can give them 1 or 2 tools or say, here are 4 components, can you use just one of these all year long? You may get a response, especially if you give them exciting examples. So thank you very much for your time and your creativity, because I know you had to do it really fast. Thank you. Marcia.
Right, speaking of doing things fast, I'm going to show you we have a bunch of resources available, tons of them. And most of them are new and you might not know about them. So I'm going to show you where they are and a little bit about them at the speed of light, because we're out of time. So SAS, we also, in addition to the framework, we also have materials and resources. Have you been to SAS? Both of you, or Kimberly, you might have. Anyway, if you go to materials and resources up here and search for global competence, you will find a list of resources that are available. And if you click on one of those resources, you will find all of this information that we've put together. You'll find the grade levels, the academic standards that are linked, a description of it, the competencies from the framework, and the resource itself, and a little bit about who provides the resource. So there's a lot of them there.
Everyone has a link with the actual lesson plan, so
Yep.
It's ready to go.
We also have all of this stuff on our PACE website. So if you go to pace.org, resources, standards aligned system, you'll find the framework and the lesson plans and resources that are on SAS. In addition to that, we have a global educator toolkit, mini grants, webinars, PACE talks, and teacher tips. These are all new things. So the Global Educator Toolkit is a new resource list of websites and tools that are available to support global education in classroom. Here's what it looks like. So if you go to PACE's website and resources, you'll see Global Educator Toolkit. There are 8 categories that are on there. This one is classroom to classroom through technology. That's like if, for example, you want to connect your classroom with a classroom in a different part of the world, here are some organizations that can help you to do that. So the list, has the organization, the logo, the link to the website, the target audience, and a description of what it is. So we have many pages to this. The other categories are international organizations, global curricula, action opportunities, international study, travel, PACE affiliated schools, school partnerships, awards, and opportunities. For K-12 people, we have some mini grants of up to $500 that are available to support development or adaptation of a curriculum. This can be within a class, a content area, or across classes and content area. And actually, we love to see collaboration. The purpose of them is to build the capacity of schools, to increase educator awareness of tools available, and to expand our instructional resources available. In 2019, we gave grants to Upper St. Clair and Bellefonte. In 2020, we gave them to Norwood and Hempfield area teachers, and we're hoping to have them speak to us about their projects at PACE's 2021 convention. For next year, If you are a K-12 educator and you're interested, apply soon because we've already approved 2. That means there's only 1 left for 2021. PaTTAN Tips is offering a new resource by and for teachers on our website. And every month we're posting teachers and educators will post a short tip for teachers related to educating K-12 students for global competence. This will be updated monthly starting now. Oops, I don't know what just happened. I don't know what happened. Can you still see that?
Yep.
All right. Monthly tips and webinars. This is the tips. Where's the next one? Oh man.
So the tips are always written and the webinars are going to be recorded, whereas this one was live and recorded. But the upcoming ones by month, there'll be 1 written tip and 1 webinar that's recorded.
I
Short,
can't get
10
out
to
of here.
20 minutes, because who has time for a long one? What teacher? That's how I look at it anyway.
All right, you're gonna just have to look at this because it's not working. So webinars are like today's webinar. We have some topics for upcoming webinars and we have them on our last slide. And we are very pleased to be partnering with our organizations, FEND and the Community-Based Global Learning Collaborative, to provide these webinars on a monthly basis on a lot of different topics related to global education. While there's a focus today on K-12, we believe that most of what we're talking about is equally applicable at higher education level. Many of them also have higher education focus, and we believe those resources are also applicable to K-12. So these will be recorded and posted on our website. Once again, these are the resources that we talked about. A handout of the PowerPoint will come to each of you and you'll have the links in that. But the big things to remember are pdesas.org and pace.org. And Deanna.
Yes, so hopefully as you've made it through the entire hour of this webinar, you've come up with some simple ideas of how to adapt a lesson or a unit to give our kids the world as we show in this picture. And hopefully you will go explore pace.org, because believe me, if we had attempted to put pace.org on here and linked to all the resources, we would have gone out of our minds, and so would have you. But the resources, that Global Educator Toolkit is chock full of stuff that hopefully can inspire you or somebody else that you work with. So any comments, questions, suggestions, anything you'd like to donate to Pacey?
Yeah, our lists are a work in progress, and we're counting on people to give us some more resources. If they go on SAS, they have to be vetted and put in a SAS format. To go on our Global Educator Toolkit, that's us. So we can put them up there. So if you know of anything that you think would be appropriate and you'd like to share, please do.
And finally, also, we do have a conference in October of next year, and we will have conferences again, right? It'll be an in-person conference in October. So if there was anything you liked during this webinar today where you would like to learn more about those kind of things over a one-day period, that conference will be for you in October of next year.
We said these webinars were monthly, but clearly they're not. They're more often than that. So there's some of the upcoming webinars on the bottom of the screen.
Right.
Sorry about the technical glitches. Blame Zoom. Or Google Slides. I'm not sure which is to blame, but one of them.
Any questions, comments?
Just thank you
Thank
very much.
you.
It's very helpful.
Good.
Well,
And if you don't have any ideas, go and visit our resources and there you will find some ideas for what to do.
Thanks for playing along.
A cool website into the chat, so people may want to avail themselves to that when they get a chance.
What's your cool website?
Yeah, tell us.
It's just called What's Up with Culture. If you just Google that, it's the first thing that pops up, but I put the link there in the chat for you all.
Nice.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I can access the chat, I will check it out.
I can
Okay.
I copied it.
Kristen's and Christians. I'll send them out in the email with the webinar recording and the slides. So yeah, thank you, Deanna and Marcia. That was great.
Yes, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Before we go, I'm just going to drop 2 other links in the chat. One is a very quick, short feedback survey, just 3 questions for the participants today. If you don't mind filling it out, we would be very grateful. And then the second one is a link to the collaborative blog where the webinars that are on the screen, you can register for them if you're interested, and we'll also post the recording and the slides there as well. So unless someone else has something to add, I will just say goodbye and thank you all for being here today.
Thanks for your participation.